Welcome everybody again to another episode of the IdeaXme show. I'm Andrea Macdonald, the founder of IdeaXme. IdeaXme is a global network, a podcast available in 40 countries worldwide, a creator series and mentor program. Our mission is to share knowledge of the future. Today we're going to talk about smart cities and smart nations. I'm here with the founder of ADDO AI, who will take us through the latest developments in the area. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Ayesha Khanna, and I am the CEO and co-founder of ADDO AI. And we are a team of machine learning engineers, data architects, and data engineers. And we have a passion for solving problems using data and artificial intelligence.
Can you take us through the benefits and the pitfalls of smart cities and smart nations?
Love that question because it's so important for when you're talking about any technology that you understand that it has both advantages and it has risks. So when you are thinking about a smart city, you're essentially thinking about an urban environment that has a digital layer on top of the physical layer. We have experienced this in terms of security wherever we are because there are cameras and sensors, and in terms of traffic containment. But more and more, we're going to see it filtering through every aspect of our life in the city. This includes sustainable buildings so that we are reducing our carbon footprint in the world. It includes autonomous vehicles that are all managed by AI and data so that are not only daily commuters optimized, but the logistics of companies and the free flow of goods and services is optimized, which has enormous benefits for the urban economy. And then, of course, this idea of augmenting spaces digitally, so that your school can be, in the case of a pandemic, for example, can be in a smaller space with fewer people nearby. And here you're using a combination of augmented reality, virtual reality, combined with artificial intelligence that is personalizing the information given to you, highlighting your strengths, identifying your weaknesses, and so on and so forth. You can imagine something similar for healthcare, all other sectors of the government. Now, all that is well and good, but whenever you have data, especially personal data, it's so important to be demanding of the companies, the government agencies that take that data from us, that they use it in an ethical, responsible, transparent, and accountable manner. Because we know just a simple example of fake news, fake videos, fake images shows us that it's so easy to manipulate human beings because AI has a lot of contextual intelligence about us because it's getting so many feeds of data from the way we're moving around to where we are. And it can use that to manipulate us if it wants. So I think there's governance, regulations, responsible AI is an act also that bold and thoughtful leaders do, even if there's no pressure, stock investor pressure or otherwise. And I think that's what we need. We need that balance.
We had Dr. Ayesha Khanna, who is, or was until recently, an all-source warrant officer for the US intelligence services. And one of her areas of interest has been food security, agricultural security. And she mentioned in her interview that there would be threats in growing food produce within smart cities. What do you think can be done to protect networks like that?
Well, I don't know how there would be threats. If anything, if you look at Singapore, we import all of our foods and almost all of it. And we have, after this pandemic shock, determined as a country that we would want 30% of our food to come from internal to our borders by 2030. So it's called 30 by 30, that's the vision. And for that, we're looking at a lot of different options. We're looking at vertical farming. We are looking at plant-based food. We're looking at food that is generated in the lab. And in order to produce food that's healthy and safe, you need artificial intelligence.
If I can interject there, Dr. Kraft was specifically, I think, referring to vertical farming. She mentioned that there were potential threats there. That obviously there are huge benefits to vertical farming, but with huge advances within smart cities and smart nations, and she used vertical farming, food production within smart cities as an example, there would be threats to guard against.
Well, I mean, look, I don't know exactly what threats she was referring to because I'm not an expert in vertical farming, but I think any place that you have networked digitization and that you're using different kinds of robotics or any other artificial intelligence powered machines to plant the water, to optimize this exposure to the sun, all of these have to be very carefully managed. Cybersecurity is one thing. You don't want anybody hacking into them and creating some kind of compound, although it would be hard because these are naturally grown. They're not grown in the lab. But even then, you do not want anything to happen to them that would be, could end up harming the urban citizens. I think that would be probably what she was thinking about. Otherwise, most of the threats that come from smart cities, digital infrastructure, are related to three things. Number one, what is your data governance? All of this data that you're gathering, how are you keeping it safe, secure, and private? The other thing is, how is your cybersecurity? How strong is it? So that you're protecting yourself against anybody who can inject poisonous code into it. And the third is, how are you taking care of people who lose their jobs? So when you have any kind of automation or new technology. And in that way, these are the things people worry about the most. Because if you look qualitatively at the efficiency of life and the time it opens up for people when they have more efficient transportation, they have more efficient energy consumption, their productivity and their leisure time should theoretically go up. So but these issues need to be taken care of. What you don't want is that people who are in agriculture are being displaced. Now, that's not the case for Singapore because we do not grow our own food. In fact, this would create absolutely new kinds of jobs. But I can see maybe in some other places, the small farmers may be displaced, and that's something to be concerned about and help them go over this hump.
So there are enormous benefits in having smart cities and smart nations. Barclays in 2020 released a report which said that there was going to be by 2026 over $20 trillion in terms of economic benefits attached to smart cities and smart nations. Could you talk to us about those economic benefits to economies of cities and countries?
Absolutely. First of all, there is so much investment going in digital infrastructure, and we know that just the act of putting up infrastructure, whether it is data centers, and of course you want to have sustainable data centers, or if it is the 5G telecommunication networks that are then going to allow the Internet of Things and more smart networks to form. Whenever you invest in anything smart, even if it's construction, we have such a large carbon footprint coming from construction. But if you use prefabrication for some percent of your construction, and you are using artificial intelligence and drones, for example, and computer vision to monitor the site and make sure that it's secure and that all inputs are optimally used so there's no wastage, you have enormous benefits to the companies and the individuals and the government agencies that are investing in this. New jobs are also created that were not there before. Once the infrastructure is in place, of course, then you have the next level of benefits and externalities, which is really what infrastructure investment is about, right? More connectivity between different parts of the country, or in the case of a small country like Singapore, to its neighbors, so that they can be more free flow of goods and services, more trade. And then you can benefit in industries like manufacturing. We can have smart factories, for example, that we haven't had yet, because all of those sensors in the machines, we don't know how to optimize them yet. We can't do predictive maintenance on them yet. It's not the case, for example, in a plane. It's quite similar, but when there's an error in the plane, when it comes down for maintenance, if you open your iPad or whatever laptop you're using, it will tell you that this particular part is about to fail. But these factories are huge, and there's so much potential over here to use robots to automate the process, but also use artificial intelligence to decrease the inefficiencies in it. And none of this is possible by the infrastructure investment in 5G telecommunications for the Internet of Things. Now we see entirely new industries pop up, which haven't been there before, such as food tech, such as prop tech, such as fintech. If you just look at this, that if you want everyone in a poorer country, and I talk more about emerging markets because these growth markets are really where we'll see these smart investments pay off. Just giving people the mobile phone and giving them and using their information and digital footprint in an ethical and accountable and responsible manner, which is in compliance with the country's regulations, you can actually give them loans to send their children to college, to get a home, to start a small business. This kind of alternate data was not available before. So many of these people remained below the poverty line. So they're just ripple effects upon ripple effects, where the economy grows as more opportunities come forth to serve people better. And the winners of this every time are customer-centric companies. Now there will be a huge tsunami of demand from customers as these technologies come for personalized, responsible services. And they will be powered by data, which is the oil or the nervous system of the smart city.
In 2020, Singapore was voted the smartest city out of 109 cities globally. Could you talk to us about why that is and the role you played in that?
Well, I didn't play a big role at all. This is something that started decades ago. Singapore has been investing in infrastructure and then in the digitization of its government services for a long time. These things don't happen overnight. It's just that one hears about them and one feels like they must have done something the last year or two. It's a constant process of looking at what are the right investments to improve not only the quality of life of citizens, but to pivot the economy constantly to adapt to the new emerging industries of the fourth industrial revolution, for example. So in Singapore, what we see is that there is a movement away from thinking about smart cities as just driven by technology. In fact, a few years ago, the Prime Minister said we're a smart nation. And the difference is subtle but very important. In a smart nation, your focus is the citizens, their sustainable lifestyle, their fitness levels, their health, their economic opportunities. And if you go to some of the new districts that are coming up in Singapore, they're extremely green. They are very low on transportation and much more pedestrian with walkways and cycles, but they're full of high-tech technology. The reason that there are not that many cars is because there will be autonomous vehicles and drone taxis. The reason why you can have, you can have mixed generation spaces so that the senior citizens are not far away, alone and lonely, but in fact are completely integrated with the younger people, with the business district, with the innovation hubs, is because when they go home, they live in a smart home, which is full of sensors that can pick up if they slip or they miss their medication or anything like that. So these are the kinds of small tweaks. They seem small, but on the surface, it just seems like it's a happy village. You know, and a lot of harmony between different cultures and minorities. But beneath it all, it's powered by a lot of tech. For example, as I was pointing out earlier, a lot of the new buildings that are coming up not only have to be green because there's a green plan in Singapore, but they have to be prefabricated, which greatly improves their carbon footprint. So what I like about the way they do a smart city is not just about technology at all. It's actually interdisciplinary teams, and their focus is citizen centricity. They even have a chatbot or an application that's every citizen's personal AI assistant. And the idea is, instead of going from one government agency to another, the assistant will guide you. Oh, you just had a baby, don't forget your immunizations. Or I see that you're at your father's at this age. You know, he's eligible for these kind of subsidies and grants. It just is one door to everything you need to engage with this government so that you are free over time to really amplify your own potential. And the way they have built this app, which is called Moments of Life, this personal assistant to citizens, they took a long time. They designed it, they tested it with the citizens, then they tested it only with young parents, then they tested it with senior citizens, then they rolled it out. So you can see it's a multi-year process, and it's constantly getting, in a very agile Silicon Valley way, getting feedback from citizens to improve it. And that is what I love about the way they do it here.
Have there been any breaches in data?
There have been for some private companies, and that has been taken extremely seriously. There have been fines associated with it. There have been a lot of talk about it. There is no concept in Singapore that technology does not require governance. And so a lot of what the different government agencies do is think about guidelines. They even have subsidized AI ethics certifications for product managers, and they have a whole slew of guidelines of processes and tools that are subsidized and education that is subsidized to nudge the entire economy towards better use of these technologies. They are very careful. Even if it's autonomous vehicles, they're very careful. They're looking for standards. They're pushing international standards. Governance is a very positive word. It's not what some people think is stifling innovation. If anything, it sets you free to innovate within low risk boundaries. And there are sandboxes available. They're always engaging with the global community. They went to World Economic Forum and they presented at Davos the guidelines for how to use artificial intelligence. They will do the same for 5G. They will do the same for quantum. They will continue to always look both at the potential of a technology, and they will always look at how to mitigate its downside.
Could we, as we are talking about guidelines and overseeing the growth of exponential technologies, could you talk a little bit of the Hybrid Reality Institute, and then after that talk to us of your work in Singapore within the area of AI and smart cities and smart nations?
Absolutely. So I started the Hybrid Reality Institute. It was only around for 4 years. A long time ago when I was in New York, my husband and I started it because he comes from a discipline of geopolitics and diplomacy, political science. And I came from software engineering and applied math and statistics. And we realized that this exponential technology set suite is affecting every single person and is affecting every single industry. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to gather the best minds that are thinking about it. So we set up a virtual institute and we had a bunch of fellows, and they started writing and thinking about what is the future of education? What is the future of virtual reality and human relationships? What is the future of social robotics? And that was such a joyful time for us. It was so meaningful. There were so many debates we would have. And we would have a salon every month in New York. And we would just debate these things like genetics, like gene editing. Like, what are the benefits for disease detection and disease prevention, but also what are the implications for editing embryos and babies? And does it mean we're entering into an era of eugenics? it was always about looking at both sides. So after we came to Singapore, I had to wrap it up because I was finishing my PhD, which is in smart cities. And then I had to think about how I could really move beyond just thinking about it to solving problems. And that's when I set up ADDO AI with my co-founder. And we are very focused on helping large companies organize their data. Everybody's sitting on a gold mine. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to do it. So moving both structured and unstructured data into the new data warehouses, which are called data lakes, extracting the information according to business priorities so that you can automate your processes, you can optimize your services, you can entirely think of new kinds of products because now you have insights into your customers and behaviors. A lot of what we do is that, and we have some of the largest telecommunications companies, financial services, and logistics companies as our clients.
I think The Economist, when speaking about data, said it's the new oil in terms of a resource, and you have that quote, I know, on your website. Do you now talk about your work within Singapore?
Yes, so I do about two things in Singapore. I run my company, the headquarters are here, but I also have a charity called 21st Century Girls. And my passion has always been to have more girls in tech because there has been a cultural bias, especially in computer science and engineering, where there's this ridiculous perception that women and girls are not as good as boys. And I wanted to shatter that myth by giving girls the opportunity to learn in a nurturing, safe environment. And so we started teaching girls coding, and we've taught thousands of girls, little girls coding through partnerships with Google and the Infocomm Media Development Authority. We have also partnered with Nanyang Polytechnic, which is one of the largest in the country, to teach girls the basics of literally the techniques of AI. They have to code it, they have to learn it, and then they have to work on a project and think about how they would solve a business problem with that and do it in an ethical manner. This has been such a pleasure for me because these girls come away from this program and they have incredible self-confidence after this. And I truly believe you don't need to become a coder, you don't need to become a data scientist, but you will need to work with one because every product and service will have that technology embedded in it. So you don't want to shrink back. You want to have the confidence to debate, innovate, argue, collaborate with people who are in this field. And you need to have the confidence to use AI and stand on its shoulders in a responsible manner. So that has been a great joy and continues to be in my work in Singapore.
And your work with the Singapore government?
I'm on the board of a couple of government agencies, and in that way I hope to contribute some of the things that I've learned in making those decisions that they're doing to set up the digital economy or to have a culture of health and fitness in the country, or in terms of an educational polytechnic to have the ability to really position themselves for the fourth industrial revolution. So I've been very lucky to be invited to support this, but I have to say that the real work is done by the incredible teams that make up these agencies and polytechnics.
Could you talk of the broad spectrum of clients you have, from banks right the way through to, I believe, the sports industry?
So we focus on about 4 or 5 industries. And the reason we can have such diversity is because we are not domain specialists as much as we are data and AI niche specialists. So that's a very specific skill that we build to a very growing demand that we see in the global economy. So we have telecommunications, we have financial services, which includes banks and insurance companies. We have logistics and transport companies. And finally, we're getting in the area of healthcare, which is a demand that our clients, new clients, have come to us and asked us to help them. Given the pandemic, it's really accelerated the need to have better operational efficiency and also personalized patient journeys so that you can have better patient outcomes cost effectively.
You have a book coming up in 2022, You and AI. Can you tell us about that?
A lot of conferences and panels that I'm on, people usually come to me and they don't ask about trends. They don't ask about any macro trend or any industry. They ask about themselves. They say, that was interesting, but what about me? What about my kids? What about my job? How should I be thinking about this? And I think that's really important. It's an important question for each one of us. And human agency in an age of AI, which is what this book, You plus AI, is about, means that you are able to adjust and adapt to this age when artificial intelligence is becoming ubiquitous. And instead of being afraid or waiting for it to disrupt you, you're aware of what's happening, you're able to use it to your own benefit, and you are aware as a consumer to set boundaries between yourself and the companies that use AI and your data. And that requires some basic knowledge. So the idea is to build that self-awareness and to increase and amplify human agency in this age where we have this hybrid reality where technology is literally embedded in our physical space all around us.
At the moment, we're going through this horrendous global pandemic. Although prior to the pandemic, there were people like Bill Gates who foresaw that this was on its way. What do you think the future holds for smart cities and smart nations? And how do you think this ongoing pandemic, I can't put it sadly into the past tense yet, affects plans for smart cities and smart nations?
The pandemic has accelerated the desire for digitization in both companies and cities. If anything, this push to digitize and make accessible services in the digital infrastructure, digital layer, will reduce the bureaucracy and friction that we often see in cities. For example, we're going to start working with a large country in Asia to develop a health crisis infrastructure, which means that if there's ever another pandemic, God forbid, or any other crisis, they will be connected to all the hospitals, the clinics, and the pharmacies. And they will be able to connect to this data, and they will be able to predict where the new hotspot would be so that they can have localized lockdowns. They will be able to very rapidly respond to spikes in infections by increasing the number of doctors in the place and the medications that they send to a place. And they will be able to monitor emergency response like vaccine efficacy through this central crisis management hub. Now that's a smart city hub for the health agency, but it was not, nobody was motivated to do it as much as they are now. So unfortunately, we have had to go through this terrible crisis, but hopefully next time we will be better prepared.
At this point in the show, we ask interviewees with whom they've connected richly during the course of their lives and careers to move their lives and careers forward. Who have you connected with richly?
I think that people who really changed me was my mid-career PhD supervisors. I think that was very important to me because at that point I had done my undergraduate and my master's. I was very enthralled by technology. I was reading all these books about it, but I had a very unbalanced approach to it, a naive approach to it. And going to a PhD and really taking a break and delving into the information systems theory, the scholars who had written about the impact of technology on society, and understanding those frameworks guided by my PhD supervisors, that fundamentally changed me, made me a clearer thinker, a more balanced thinker, a more critical thinker. And we lose that sometimes. We really do, whether we are bankers or technologists or marketing people, we somehow lose the ability to be deeply humane and to also be deeply critical of what we're doing, to question it. And we drink the Kool-Aid way too eagerly. So that was a turning point in my career. And it was just pure generosity of spirit that we would have these conversations with other students after class, and such a desire to communicate and to inform and to guide students. I find that just so inspiring. I think part of the reason I started my charity 21st Century Girls was also to bring that spirit that I had benefited from to the students, the young girls in Singapore.
To Ayesha Khanna, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thank you for moving the human story forward.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for having me on this podcast.
Thank you very much for being with us on this episode of the ideaXme show. Our mission is to move the human story forward by sharing knowledge of the future. You can find us across the internet on all the major audio podcasting networks at www.radioideaXme.com, YouTube and Vimeo. Please subscribe